You trip and fall, and your knife finds a new home in a person's chest. You trip and fall again, and now the person has mysteriously disappeared and has been replaced with a trash bag. You trip and fall again, and now you find yourself at a garbage can. And there, you think to yourself, maybe you are a bad person. But then you remember, before doing all of this, you threw your plastic bottles in the recycling bin, and now they will get recycled into various medical devices that will save people, the world is cleaner, and you are actually a hero. That's how it works, right? At least that's what I thought, but it turns out that's not actually the case, and the plastic recycling industry is filled with lies. I found out about all of this very recently and learned a lot of weird things in my deep dive into this rabbit hole, so I decided to make a short summary of all the information. Also, for some of the information, I used this report by the Center of Climate Integrity called The Fraud of Plastic Recycling, which is a very interesting read. I will link it in the description if you want to have a look at it yourself.
The feeling was the plastics industry is under fire. We got to do what it takes to take the heat off because we want to continue to make plastic products.
So it's the 50s, people are coming off of World War II, everybody's traumatized, and they have a high tendency to start wilding out. And of course, petrochemical companies are no exception, so they start huffing natural gases and getting hopped up on fossil fuels. And they are having a great time mass producing plastic products. It's cheap, and you can make all kinds of things with it. And right from the start, they figured out a way to ensure steady growing demand for their products. And that was disposability. If you can use a product only once, then they need to be purchased again and again and again. At SPI's 1956 National Conference, SPI is the Society of the Plastic Industry, participants were told that developments should be aimed at low cost, big volume, practicability, and expendability. In short, the producer's aim should be for their products to end up in the garbage wagon. So all of this led to plastics becoming one of the major parts of the solid waste crisis by the early 70s. And this led to the public becoming very angry, and the plastic industry was faced with threat of regulation. And so they responded with two solutions. First was landfilling. In the 70s, they argued that plastics were the ideal material for landfilling because, quote, they don't biodegrade and they just sit there. Now, the second solution was WTE, waste to energy, and it essentially means incineration, burning the waste and using it for energy. Both of these solutions didn't really work and did not produce sufficient results, so by the mid-1980s, the industry again was faced with public backlash and also proposals of banning single-use plastics. So this time, they came up with a solution that they knew it was going to be received very well by everyone, and that was recycling. And so quickly they came together and started their campaign of promoting recycling. They were trying really hard to show that they were really committed to it.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't.
But there was a tiny little problem there. At the time in the 80s, when they started promoting mechanical recycling, recovery of all the plastic waste needed a lot of expensive infrastructure that wasn't really there. Sorting technologies were just not good enough to handle the wide variety of plastics, and recycling facilities needed to be built without any guarantee that they would ever see a return for their money.
There was a lot of discussion about how difficult it was to recycle. They knew that the infrastructure wasn't there to really have recycling amount to a whole lot.
So at this point, recycling is not really happening, or at least not in an effective way, and the industry knows it. So again, they're faced with a lot of backlash and threats of regulation. In one document from 1989, Larry Thomas, a former president of the SPI, calls executives at Exxon, Chevron, Amoco, Dow DuPont, and a whole bunch of others to a private meeting and tells them the image of plastics is deteriorating at an alarming rate. We are approaching a point of no return. The viability of the industry and the profitability of your company are at stake. So they desperately needed another solution.
The basic question on the table was, you guys, as our trade association in the plastics industry, aren't doing enough. We need to do more. I remember this is one of these exchanges that sticks with me 35 years later, or however long it's been. And it was, what we need to do is advertise our way out of it. That was the idea thrown out.
And that's exactly what they did. And this meant the beginning of a $50 million a year ad campaign promoting the benefits of recycling.
The bottle may look empty, yet it's anything but trash. It's full of potential. And at DuPont, we're making sure that the potential isn't thrown away. We've pioneered the country's largest, most comprehensive plastic recycling program to help plastic fill valuable uses and roles instead of filling valuable land. At DuPont, we make the things that make a difference.
For example, between fall 1992 and summer 1993, in a 9-month stretch, they spent $18 million on ads, and that equals $40 million in 2024. Another very important part of their campaign was the recycling symbol. You've probably seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's a very recognizable symbol at this point. You know, you pick up a product, turn it over, and you see the symbol and you think to yourself, oh man, this is gonna get recycled so hard. And that's when you feel that sweet vibration and warmth in your plums, because you know the environment is going to be clean, it's all gonna get recycled and everything is okay. But that's not the case at all. In 1990, the Connecticut DEC explained, the symbol suggests the plastic containers are made of recycled material or that they are recyclable. But the fact that a technology may exist to recycle a particular container does not guarantee that it is economically recyclable. So essentially, this was another one of their feel-good projects to tell the public, hey, recycling is happening, guys. It's going down. We're doing it. We're recycling so hard right now. And they pushed for this hard. In 1989, oil and plastic executives began a quiet campaign to lobby almost 40 states to mandate that the symbol appear on all plastics, even if there was no way to economically recycle it. And this is where things get hilarious, because by early 1990s, they still haven't figured out the whole recycling thing yet, and they started to realize that waste to energy was probably going to be the most cost-effective and practical option. But at this point, the public is totally against WTE, and they really want recycling, and this is because of the industry's ad campaigns. Quote, the public is generally aware, partly thanks to industry information efforts, that's French for propaganda by the way, that plastics can be economically recycled as materials. So their ad campaign worked so well, they're now stuck in their own lies. And of course, they didn't mind this, they're just having a great time producing plastics with the boys. And this essentially meant that they had won, and the lie of plastic recycling had put the people's minds at ease. And from 1990s up until 2015, the heat from the public and lawmakers went away. And this is very evident because in 1996, Center of Plastics Recycling Research closed down, as did several other plastics recycling facilities owned by petrochemical companies. NPRC fell well short of its 25% recycling commitment. It recycled under 2% as of 1995 and was sold in 1999. Recycling-oriented industry front groups also shifted to the background, or in the case of groups like COPE, ceased operation. Day one. They didn't meet any of their goals, and they got away with it. It was never about actually figuring out recycling in a practical way, it was just about relieving the public and regulatory pressure. As Exxon Chemical Vice President in 1994 put it, we are committed to the activities, but not committed to the results. I bet this guy's wife hears that quote all the time. Fast forward to 2015, people become more aware of all the waste in the oceans and really everywhere, and also microplastics. So again, the heat starts to come back. So in 2017, the plastic industry came out with a new strategy, and that was pushing old technologies that has existed for years as some kind of new promising way of recycling. And they call it advanced recycling. And yes, that is the official term for it. I will get into that in the next section, which is the problems with recycling. Why is it so hard to make recycling work? Why does it sound like an Elden Ring boss fight? Well, first, there are thousands of different types of plastics, each with its own chemical composition and characteristics. And this means most of these plastics cannot be recycled. And this is because you cannot recycle different types of plastics together. For example, you can't recycle a PET bottle with an HDPE bottle, even though they look similar. And so when recycling plastics, a facility should sort and separate all of these different kinds of plastics to maintain a high purity in their recycled products. And so even though on paper you might be able to recycle certain kinds of plastics, in practice, it's almost impossible. Especially considering, one, today there is even more kinds of plastic compared to the past and sorting is even harder. Two, a lot of single-use plastic products are made up of different types of plastic polymers and paper and metals and adhesives, glue that holds the entire thing together. And three, even products made of one type of polymer often can't be recycled because they include different types of chemical additives or colorants. More than 10,000 different additives can be used to give plastics different colors and technical properties. For example, PET is accepted by most recycling programs, but PET bottles cannot be recycled with PET clamshells. Another problem is the quality of the plastic degrades as it's recycled. The long polymer chains that are in these products are sensitive to heat, and each time they're melted, they become shorter. So you can realistically recycle plastics once or maybe twice. And so both the use and the recyclability of these products is limited. For example, a food-grade plastic bottle gets recycled and becomes a component for a park bench. And so once you actually figure out the science of it, once you get past these problems, the next thing is the cost of producing recycled plastic is higher than making new plastic or virgin plastic, as the industry calls it. So economically, it doesn't make much sense. Collection, transporting, sorting, and processing takes more time and money just to create a lower quality product. For example, going back to the advanced recycling method, first of all, it requires a pure, high-quality feedstock to create valuable output, but also a 2023 study estimated that this method ends up being 1.6 times more expensive compared to virgin products. Oh, and also it's highly inefficient. Only 14% of material processed through advanced recycling actually ends up as plastic. The rest either fuels the process or ends up as waste. Oh, and also there's nothing advanced about it. The technology has existed since the 70s. And there were already research in the 70s and 80s explaining how it was probably not going to be a viable option. Now, once you get past the economics of the recycling process itself, now you gotta deal with the end market. Because of what we just discussed, the recycling resin is more expensive and lower quality compared to virgin resin or plastic. So a lot of manufacturers are just not interested in recycled materials. As explained in a 1973 report commissioned by the SPI, quote, "There are no effective marketing mechanisms for trade in contaminated mixed plastics. When plastics leave fabrication points, they are almost never recovered. There is no recovery from obsolete products." And once you get past all of these problems, the main problem presents itself, and that is recycled products are a direct competition to virgin plastics. Why would the industry want this to work? It just makes no sense for them. The only incentive that they will ever have is reducing public backlash and regulation. Old Larry T., former president of the SBI, says he saw an industry that did not want recycling to work because if the job is to sell as much oil as you possibly can, any amount of recycled plastic is competition. They were not interested in putting any real money or effort into recycling because they wanted to sell virgin material. Nobody that is producing a virgin product wants something to come along that is going to replace it. Produce more virgin material. That's their business. Now, the outcome. What is the outcome of all of this? Well, of all the plastics ever produced, less than 10% has been recycled. The rest, a little bit of it has been incinerated, and most of it has ended up in landfillings in poor countries and the oceans and the environment and Asmongold's room, evidently. To make matters even worse, in 2018, China, the biggest importer of plastic waste, decided that they were going to ban most imports. And this caused most Western countries to panic and scramble to find new places to dump their plastic waste, most of which, again, ended up in poor developing countries. These countries can't even handle their own waste. They just lack the infrastructure and resources to manage all of this trash properly, and it just ends with more environmental disasters. In 2018, the equivalent of 68,000 shipping containers of American plastic recycling were exported from the US to developing countries like Bangladesh, Laos, Ethiopia, and Senegal, countries that mismanage more than 70% of their own plastic waste. Now, going back to advanced recycling, chemical recycling it's actually called, the industry's super duper modern and extra double advanced technology, a 2020 report from Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives identified 37 facilities using chemical recycling technologies that had been proposed or built since the early 2000s. Of the 37, only 3 were operational and none were successfully producing new plastic. Greenspace examined 51 recycling facilities the same year and found that roughly 25% were not engaged in recycling but were instead WTE facilities of various sorts. Only 4 were plastic-to-plastic facilities and none were operational or showed any indications of future viability. Investigations by Reuters showed that numerous chemical recycling facilities that the industry has publicly announced since 2017 have mostly turned out to be plastic-to-fuel facilities, years behind schedule, or abandoned altogether. Now, what is the consequence of this sad but also hilarious mess? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. Good news is, new Barbarella series announced ahead of Sydney Sweeney film. Thank you, Microsoft News. Very cool. Bad news is there's plastic in our balls. You heard that right. According to a research published by Oxford University, they examined 23 human and 47 dog testes and they found microplastics in all of them, which is alarming, but at least will be remembered as the plastic ball people in the history books, running around carefree with plastic-filled sacks. And again, there's good news and there's bad news. Good news is it's not all going to your balls. Bad news is it's going to the rest of your body. According to a study in 2023, they found that microplastics can breach the blood-brain barrier and reach your brain. A study in 2021 showed microplastics in human placenta, that is where the fetus, the baby, develops. Another study in the same year showed them in the lung tissue, proving that you can huff microplastics to your heart's content. And of course, we have evidence of microplastics being in marine organisms, seafood, regular-ass food, and water. Essentially, it's everywhere. Inside you, outside, your mom might be seeing this microplastics guy, your girlfriend might leave you for him, you might be cheating on microplastics with microplastics. Now, this area of research and studies is relatively new, so the true scale of short and long-term effects of microplastics in humans and other species is not really fully clear. But some of the evidence that we have of the problems that this causes for humans include skin irritation and allergic reactions, respiratory issues, hormonal disruptions, cancer, reproductive and developmental issues, and chronic inflammation. Now, what is the point of all of this? What is the takeaway from this video? A, we may or may not have fucked ourselves in every which way possible, but at least we're having a great time, right? So, yesterday actually, I was enjoying a nice drink with a plastic straw, and this girl comes out of nowhere and starts yelling at me, "Why are you using plastic straw? Think about the turtles, they're dying." And I said, "Fuck 'em." And I threw this plastic straw at her. Now, the plastic straw reached unnaturally high speeds, piercing her eyeball, and just blood instantly starts squirting out. She just starts running into the street. Now, this car was coming down the street. This beautiful family of 5 is inside the car, and the driver, the father of the family, to avoid hitting the girl, swerves to the left, crashing into the store, and the car instantly exploded, thus bringing this beautiful family to their untimely demise. And that's when I left the scene to avoid possible incarceration. B, awareness. Maybe if we could raise some awareness about this issue of all the lies involved in this, maybe people will reconsider the type of products they use, the type of products they purchase, the way they handle their waste, and just in general, be more informed about what's going on around them. And really, that's all regular people can do. I mean, I don't think we can just raise our hand and go, stop, and the plastic industry is going to go, you know what, I got a point, guys. I think we might be evil. And also, a world without plastics is not something that's going to happen. I think a reduction in production might be possible, but it's not going to happen unless we find some new magical material. Plastics are always going to be a thing in our life. So that's it. Hopefully you learned something in this video. If you did like the video, if you think somebody else might find this information useful, share the video. And if you want more, subscribe. But that's it. Thank you for watching, and get me out of here.